Today, I've got Jen Perelman back in the Nerd Zone. We're going to talk to Jen about her run for Congress, what she's working on now, current events, take some audience questions. But first,
There's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's in. Drew, come roll with the gang gang. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's in. Drew, come roll with the gang gang.
hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Jen, welcome back to the Nerd Zone. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here. All is good.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like around 9 months since you were on, and I remember you were going up against a pretty entrenched incumbent in Florida.
Yeah.
And kind of fighting the system to some extent. And so I'm kind of curious, what was the race like, and like what were some kind of learnings as you look back on it?
It was, you know what? It was a whirlwind experience. For the most part, it was a privilege. I, for the most part, enjoyed it. And especially how we managed our campaign. You know, we ran a very service-oriented campaign. Our volunteers were all out in the community doing service. And so it wasn't a typical just canvassing. So we really tried to build the coalition, which was amazing. So it was a really good experience. And we really weren't expecting to win. You know, like people were, you know, I still get people where they're sort of like almost like apologetic, you know, that we didn't win. And I'm like, look, you know, the point of a campaign, and this is something, I'm actually writing a book about this, because the point of the campaign, while yes, it's to get one person into office, it is part of a bigger machine of progress, and it is part of moving everything forward and bringing more and more people into that fold. And so we really took that campaign as a platform to push forward ideas. And so while, yes, we were disappointed that we didn't win, we would have loved to win. I mean, all of that. We got close to 30%. In the middle of a pandemic, being completely blacked out by mainstream media and our local Democratic clubs. We got this,
that's pretty impressive. Almost 30%.
Yeah, and actually, as a comparison, we got the same number of votes in 2020 that Tim Canova got in 2016. And in 2016, he had $4 million an endorsement from Bernie. We had $400,000 and a pandemic. And so we got the same amount of votes that he did. So we are making progress as a movement. And really, that's what we're trying to do in South Florida. But yeah, I mean, we would have liked to win. That would be great. I honestly would feel better about the progress for everybody versus just me. It was never about me getting that job. But, you know, it's been such an amazing ride, and we've built such strong coalitions that I feel like we've made so much progress locally. And I find that to be really crucial. Like, that's where it's at. So I feel very pleased with where our campaign brought us, even though we didn't win.
So tell me about the next chapter after the campaign ended. How did you think about where you want to spend your time?
So I knew that, you know, well, a lot of our volunteers from when I was running, we called it GenCorps, and they wanted to keep it going. So I incorporated GenCorps. We are now a service-based organization. I'm waiting to get my 501c4, and that's because I want to be able to endorse non-corporate candidates. And so GenCorps we do community service. We do food distributions, beach cleanups, like just different things. We have a community garden that we're working on. And so I've kept that going. And then the other aspect of our campaign, just the big platform, I mean, having like over 50,000 Twitter followers, and I never had that before. So now I have this platform, what to do with it. And so we started a podcast called JENerational Change. And our mission is transforming politics into service. And that's what we're about. GenCorps, we say it's representation through service. and just building coalitions and getting information out there and educating people and really trying to chip away at the oligarchy. And so it just sort of organically happened that where we are now.
That's super exciting. I'm curious about your take on Florida in that, you seem like a super progressive, service-oriented activist in some ways. And when I read about Florida in the news, I see the governor taking a different tack, and just Florida being, is it more diverse than the rest of us in the lower 48 give Florida credit for? Like, what's going on? How are you in Florida?
Okay, yeah, it's kind of strange. Florida is a red state. Now, I know in the past they've referred to it as a swing or a purple. Mm-hmm. It really isn't. It really isn't. It's a red state. We have 67 counties, I believe 67 counties, and only 6 of them, I think 6 or 7, have any sort of Democratic presence, are blue, and have like enough of anything to get anything done. So yeah, I'm in one of those. I'm in Broward. So in South Florida, it's like this blue oasis, but it's still a more centrist blue. And so a lot of what we're working on, and something else about Florida that people don't know, and this is also similar, I think, in Texas, Florida is not very centralized. So like our governor can issue some sort of mandate that schools are going to open, and our county is going to go, oh no, and it's not going to happen. And so Florida is a much more county run kind of place than a lot of other places might be. And so really that's why it's so important to me locally to do what we're doing, because really when I go out, I see a lot of people that are suffering and vulnerable, and that's across the board. It's not red or blue. I mean, that's just across the board. But I'm able to have obviously a little bit more sway with the blue people to get things done than I am going to have with our red people. Yeah. And with some things, I'm aligned with the red people. I go to the Republican meetings. I met them. They believe in Everglades restoration. And that is something that we totally agree on. We all agree on getting, they agree with publicly financed elections. A lot of these people like getting the corruption out. So, I'll work with anybody on any issue if they're moving in the same direction.
So tell me about how you're feeling, about the Democratic Party today. I know that when we last talked, I think you were pushing. I think you were making the argument like 2 wings of the same bird, and we want big change, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your thoughts are about President Biden. Like, what's your take on how it's going?
Exactly as I expected. Pretty milquetoast, pretty basic, like Obama 2.0, pretty standard. And, people are being somewhat surprised. The people that sort of tried to tell us, oh, you'll help us get Biden in, then we'll push him to the left. He's not moving to the left. This is where it is. He's corporate. But I will say this, and I very begrudgingly voted for Biden. It's not something I was psyched about. It's not something I was a proponent of. But I did. And I am at least comforted in that the DACA kids are safe and they're not living in fear. And so I feel like that's 100 and something thousand people where I see a tangible benefit from not having Trump. But other than that, we're still spiraling down, and they're still both corporate parties. We don't have a Labor Party in this country. We don't have a Labor Party.
Wow. So a lot of people have said that the stimulus plan was pretty progressive in that there was a lot of help to individuals, and there was very strong opposition from the Republicans in both the House and the Senate against the bill, saying it was too expensive. But in your view, it did not go far enough.
No, of course not. And what's interesting is the Democrats are their own worst enemy. I don't get them at all. We win the Senate and Chuck Schumer basically sticks out an olive branch and says, oh, we're going to share power with Mitch McConnell. We have a majority, and yet we still can't get anything done, not anything of real substance. And the thing is, so they came through with the $1,400, but it's means tested, first of all. Second of all, they're getting it on the back end because it's going to be subject to garnishing and liens. right? So they're letting that go to debts due. There's no provision, there's no protection of that $1,400. It's not exempt. So the majority of people right now that need that money are also in debt. So it's basically a waste. Now, the child tax credit is good, you know, and the fact that some people will be getting $1,400, yay them. But no, this is like putting a Band-Aid on an amputation. Like, it's just nothing near what we need. I mean, people, as soon as the eviction moratorium is up, we're looking at possibly 30 million homeless people in this country. That's crazy.
You mentioned DACA and immigration. I'm curious, I think Biden's going to have to navigate a very tough issue with if there's an increasing number of migrants moving from Central America looking for a better life here. How can he handle that in a humane way, but still be pragmatic? Because there has to be some process, right?
Yeah. Well, I see an immense job opportunity for people because what they're really lacking is staff to process the people. The issue is processing. The people that we're talking about are not criminals, right? So these are not people that are dangerous. These are people that need to be processed and then sent wherever it is they're on their way to go. Why we lock them up like criminals is beyond me. I can't fathom it for the life of me. These people are not criminals. And I find it incredibly hard to believe that we couldn't come up with a better housing situation for people that if we need one. We're paying, $750 a day per head for that's for our facility here in Homestead. So I'm assuming that's probably fairly standard. Are you telling me we can't find better accommodations for these people for $750 a day each person? I find that outrageous. There's not dorms or empty apartments or even military housing that's available somewhere. No, of course there is. There's absolutely availability, but this is a profit motive. It's a profit motive. And when you have profit motive in incarceration, this is the kind of stuff that you see. We're incarcerating children who are not criminals. Like, that's just crazy. Yeah. So you hire people, you process the people, and you send them on their way. That's what you do.
So what do you think is the future of the Democratic Party? You've got Pelosi and Schumer. I mean, they're not spring chickens. Like, they're probably in their sunset years, right? So what are you hoping for? Who do you see as like the voice for the Democratic Party in your view?
I mean, who I want to be the voice of the Democratic Party is Nina Turner. Who is the next in line? Look, it's going to come down to what we call generational change and this sort of shift in dynamics. And it's not just Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. A lot of them are really old. And we do see an increase in the more, it's funny that we're called leftists and the rest of the world we're just centrists, but like that we're seeing these progressive Dems coming in, and it is increasing. It is. There's no doubt about it. We got Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Mondaire Jones. Like, there are people coming in, and really it's going to come down to them coming together and being corralled and somebody really taking it on as a leadership role. We have the power there now. It just isn't being harnessed. And when I think about it, I can share this with you. So I was sitting here about a half an hour ago and my phone rang and it was Nina Turner. And by the way, that never gets old. Like, it never gets old. And I'm just like giddy and I'm like, hi, like I'm so excited. But she is what the future is of the party in terms of leadership. She is the type of person that is not only on the right side of policy, as far as I'm concerned, because the squad, they're on the correct side of policy. They're in my sandbox. They want what I want. I just think that there's not enough like leadership and fortitude to coalesce together and enough people really willing to take the stand. And it really only takes one to start. It really does. And I just hope that we can get someone like Nina in there and that will start being the direction that we're going, because somebody needs to take a stand. You're not going to win every time, but you're never going to win if you don't take a stand. So, that's the problem. They have the right ideas, but they just don't have the gumption.
What is it that you see in Nina Turner that you don't see in the squad or other leaders?
She has 0 Fs to give. She is, let me tell you something. I have this troll that comes on my live stream every time. Declan, he comes on my live. I don't know why he comes, just to troll us. And he always says, no matter who we're talking to, whatever candidate, that they will bend the knee to Nancy Pelosi once they're in Congress. They'll bend their knee. And I can tell you something about Nina Turner. She ain't kneeling. Not going to happen. So when you see somebody who is not about a career, and that's something that people have to understand. And that is politics. It's like the people that are in the squad, if they want to stay there, they do sort of think that they have to play nice. I don't agree, but I don't, that's their strategy in terms of longevity and getting things done in the long term. So I'm not judging it, but someone like Nina, she's not going along to get along. That's just not going to happen. And she doesn't need to be making friends. So to me, of anybody I know, she is the most like me with that mentality, as she's going to kick ass and take names. Cori Bush, I think when she starts to really get in the groove and have some be established, I think she's that way too.
And we should talk, given the audience for this show has a lot of folks from the Yang Gang. What's your observation? Have you been following what Andrew Yang's up to, and what are your thoughts on him?
I will always support him. I've had a few conversations with him, and I find him to be an incredibly reasonable and decent human being. And so when somebody like that is seeking a position of authority and a position where they have power and a platform, I'm always going to want someone like that in that position based on their judgment. What I don't like to do, especially regarding him, is talk specific policy, because we agree on some things, we don't agree on some things. But he is someone that I just respect his character. And that to me is where it all starts. You put people in office with decent character and integrity, and that are actually working for the people, and then you will get the results you want ultimately. And so I like him, and I'll always support him. Obviously, I also support Diane Morales. I think, and I don't know what the odds are there. I think Andrew's looking great for it, and I'm very excited. I think he would be an amazing mayor. I think that he would be an amazing executive leader. So I have very much respect for him. And I like Diane Morales. There's no doubt about it. I mean, she's one of my progressive people. And if I lived there, I probably would vote for Diane Morales. But I have nothing but the best things to say about Andrew.
Yeah, well, I guess if you live there, you could also put Andrew as your number two.
Exactly.
Choice, right?
Exactly. And that's another thing that I think is amazing that New York is doing.
Yeah. We have a question from Inforno asking about Governor DeSantis doing some redistricting. Yeah. What's your take on that?
Well, we're looking to get 2 new seats in the state. So one of those seats will most likely be in what we call the I-4 corridor, which is between Orlando and Tampa area, like kind of central. That's where the other big population boom is. And then we will be getting a new district down here somewhere between Dade and Broward. It could very easily impact me. It's not going to divide me from Debbie, I don't think. I think no matter what happens, I'll still be in her district. But yeah, it'll change the demographics of my district personally. So it is going to matter. Whether or not that impacts our decision of whether or not we want to try to run again or what we're going to do, I don't know, but it will absolutely have an impact. There will be an additional district in my general vicinity, in my close vicinity.
And what's your read on the governor? I heard that he's leading in the country for president in 2024, and I was surprised because I just don't what's behind. I'm guessing you're not a big fan of his, but help us understand what's his approach and why do you think he's resonating with so many people across the whole country?
Okay, so there's a lot of things about Ron DeSantis. So first of all, he is basically mini Trump. Trump installed him. Trump put him in. He wasn't even on the slate. He came out of nowhere, and he is there basically to do Trump's bidding. I think regarding legal issues in the state of Florida. I think regarding all sorts of things. He's Trump. And so he has that support behind him. But then the other thing is, remember, I don't know if you know this, we had Rick Scott as our governor for 8 years here. And our bar is very low. Rick Scott is a complete criminal. I mean, he had to plead the fifth like 70 something times on the stand. Like, I mean, he's a horrible human being. I actually used to call Rick Scott Voldemort. Now, of course, he's one of our senators. He still is Voldemort. So by comparison, when Ron DeSantis came in, he wasn't so bad, like, and that it's look, we're like abused spouses in Florida. We have very low standards of what we are entitled to. So Ron DeSantis, I think the biggest determination of how far he'll get in anything is going to be the fallout at the end of the day, whether or not it benefits him or hurts him, his connection with Trump. That's what it's really ultimately going to come down to. There are people that are talking about who's going to challenge him from the Democratic side for governor. I think even how well he'll do in that race is going to come down to where things fall at the end of the day as to how he's seen in relation to Trump. Because that's really that's his character is Trump.
Right.
So it's going to come down to how people feel about that. And I think there's a lot of time between now and then.
Yeah. Now, it does seem like in Florida and other kind of red parts of the country that Trump is still quite popular and, able to sway a large number of people. Do you think, are we going to see another Trump candidacy in 2024, do you think?
If there were no other legal ramifications going on in his life and him being prosecuted in the Southern District of New York, I know that the feds have in on him. Like, there's a lot of things going on. He's going to have a lot of financial issues that he's contending with. I don't know. I mean, in 4 years is kind of a long time to predict, especially given how fast things can turn nowadays. But I think that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both seeing these huge splits, to be honest with you. Like, there's definitely these like warring factions within both parties that are kind of making them like implode. I mean, your Mitt Romneys of the world hate Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But the thing about Republicans is that they fall in line. And Democrats, it's all about identity and personality. And this is why we can't get out of our own way. Republicans fall in line even when they hate it. They hold their nose and do it. And so it'll be interesting to see. I think that a lot of them are waiting to see what the legal fallout is going to be from a lot of these investigations into Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. We may not have seen the last of the Donald.
No.
In Florida, I'm curious about the COVID stuff. I think Florida kind of is out in front in many ways, reopening pretty quickly. And I saw in the news a lot of large gatherings and festivities.
I went to a super spreader wedding over the weekend, and what's interesting is I actually have had COVID.
So is it just sort of everything like is back to before COVID and people are just, how does that work?
It's, people are masked in all the indoor places. Everybody's masked in the supermarket. Everybody's masked in the indoor places. I haven't really done anything. Like, I stopped doing things, so I don't really see it, but no, it's definitely not back to normal. Certainly there's certain age demographics, the spring breakers, and for them, it's just all fun and games. But no, it's not back to normal because we also have a very big elderly population. And I also think that that's one of the things where the numbers are kind of skewed. I'm not in any way defending the state of Florida, but I think that the numbers across the board are being skewed because apparently when people die, if they test positive for COVID, it's getting marked as a COVID death. And that isn't necessarily the scientific way to really assess a situation. And I also would be very curious, and maybe since I'm on the Nerd Show, maybe you guys know the answer to this. So let's say Florida is ahead in terms of, fatality numbers, but Florida also had a very larger vulnerable population to start with. So we're not starting, you don't have, what do you call it? You don't have like I'm losing my mind like lately. The control group, right? Like it's not a good thing. So if we have more old people and more sick people and more vulnerable people, then yeah, we're going to have higher death. What I'd be curious to know is, has anybody looked at the relation between what different states have done with their death rates? So like, for example, California has been completely shut down. Florida hasn't. I'd be very curious to notice if anything that we're assessing is based on those strategies. Are they taking into account the demographics prior? because these things matter when you're talking about a disease that affects vulnerable people.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? Yeah. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, like we see these numbers, but a lot of it is media fear factor. I know people that have died from COVID, so I'm not denying that this is a thing. But I think in terms of saying Florida has the worst, I think we also have probably the most old people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right that you can't just point to the absolute numbers for any state, because Florida is also a big state, so it's not surprising that there's more cases than other states. I think the thing that is unusual is that if the numbers are still high, why the rush to kind of relax some of the mitigations? Like Texas is a good example where they had a statewide mask mandate. It didn't really cost people anything to wear the mask. It's just a little piece of cloth. Like, so why remove it when you don't have, most of your people vaccinated? Like, what's the upside to doing that?
Well, I can't, I mean, from a science perspective, there's no upside. From a financial perspective, yeah, because their corporations and their business people want to get things as back to normal as possible and have as least restrictions and have people back out and about and kind of just put a Band-Aid on this and make it go away. But as from a science perspective, I have, my opinion on this from the very beginning. And I was saying this more than a year ago. I was not in favor of the shutting down. I was in favor of mask wearing and social distancing and people being responsible. But the problem in this country is that we don't have a sense of the collective or a care for the collective like other countries do. And so people are so much more concerned with their individual rights than with their responsibilities. And so you're not going to have the same mindset that other countries do, like Japan or New Zealand or wherever, where people care about the collective more. But the shutting down, I think, just prolonged what was inevitable. I have yet to see any information that indicates that it was the better move to do. I haven't seen that information, and we're not going to see that information because, again, there's no control groups. It's just this most chaotic, haphazard thing from state to state, what's going on. And it's like, we're never going to learn from this.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways you could argue the shutdown is a symptom of not doing better sustainable mitigation early.
Yep.
Because like my brother, was in Singapore until just recently, and they're pretty hardcore about their mitigation. But because of that, the restaurants are open, even like nightclubs are open, museums are open, and they're able to get back to business. But they do temperature checks before you go in. When you fly in, you have to go under quarantine. You have to be tested before and after you fly in. So they're very particular. But the alternative is if you just say like, oh, everybody do your own thing, it then gets out of control. And then the only thing you can do is shut down.
Yeah.
And it becomes this vicious circle because then people get pissed and they want to reopen as soon as they can. And then it just kind of keeps repeating itself.
Yeah. But I mean, remember, we make policy in this country based on two things, and that's fear and profit. And we don't often have policy that's based on science. Actually, the only policy that is based on science, as far as I'm concerned, is the masking and social distancing, because even the way they do the testing, to me, that's not sound. So my friend gets tested and then flies somewhere. Well, then you just got on an airplane after you got tested and you're not going to quarantine. So what's the point of getting tested? And yet people are getting tested. It's there. People are just acting out of fear. And that's always that always is concerning to me.
Well, yeah, I certainly agree with you that if you get tested, do you fly in a plane and you mix with a bunch of people in an airport, you're certainly at risk. However, if you get tested and you're positive and then you're prevented from flying, that is a benefit, at least.
It is. Right? It's a benefit, but you have to remember how people can just get they're tested if they want to get tested. Anybody can go get on a plane here without getting tested. I could go buy a ticket to go anywhere in this country without getting tested. Yeah. So there's no universal, there's no cohesion. No. And that's the problem. And so therefore it's really a free for all. So what does it really matter how good California's doing if I could be living in Utah and drive over with my COVID?
Yeah, that has been a challenge for our mitigation efforts as a country, where it's only as good as the weakest state's mitigations, like, so
Yeah.
it's like a non-smoking policy. Like if there's one guy in the corner puffing away, it kind of screws it over for everybody.
Well, that was like back in the old days. I don't know. I'm probably older than you, I think, but 71.
Oh, okay. Just a little bit then.
Okay. So I remember flying, and on the plane, you had the smoking section and the non-smoking section on an encapsulated tube.
Right.
Flying through the air.
I remember.
Right. Yeah. So it's that same thing. It's like you cannot, you just, I don't know. I feel like closing down was unnecessary, and that there was infinite more. And also remember, we don't have healthcare in this country to begin with. So we already have a bigger set of vulnerable people in this country than other countries because our people don't get preventative healthcare. So we're like ripe to be like the worst COVID disaster in the world.
Yeah, I was talking with my brother about this because we were comparing the mitigations here versus what he was experiencing in Singapore. And I think one of the conclusions was that if you take that, either call it Singapore or New Zealand or Japan approach, you do have to be willing to give up short term to have better long term. That is not a trade-off a lot of us here are willing to make. It's hard to say, hey, you're going to be inconvenienced now, and you're not going to be able to do certain things, but that's actually going to give you more freedom in the long run than just kind of like driving without the lights on and no seatbelt. And it feels good for a little while and then you crash.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying. I mean, our country, it is not our character to consider everybody else in the collective. And you really do need to have that mindset in order to manage a global pandemic. Like you're only as strong as your least vaccinated person. Yeah. And so if we're circling a drain, and we have people that we are all about instant gratification. So no, you're right. Nobody wants to prolong anything. I want mine now. I want it right now. I want the food I want, whatever season I want it, and farmers be damned. Like we want it now. We're Veruca Salt. Right? I want an Oompa Loompa. So like we're not about foregoing anything for anybody. And that is something that is a character flaw in our collective character as a country. I think that that's a huge problem. I think that's one of the biggest things that differentiates us from other developed nations that are infinitely more successful when it comes to their minimum standard of living and people's education and people's happiness. And, these things are measured. And we know in places like Scandinavia that that's infinitely better than here. And one of the things that they have is a concern for the collective. And it's same in New Zealand, same in Asia, same in a lot of countries. And we just don't have that here. We're every man for himself. I got me mine. You pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Yeah.
Let's shift topics for a bit, and then we'll wrap up in a little bit. And if other people have questions for Jen, go ahead and put them in the chat. Oh, I see Inferno has another question for you. Do you have any opinion on Alan Ellison's chances against the Marco?
Okay, so here's the thing. I don't know where Inferno lives. It's probably not a Florida person, but asking from outside the state, because this is one of those things that I wish I could explain. No, we don't like Marco Rubio. No, Texas doesn't really like Ted Cruz, but yet we can't seem to get rid of them. I love Alan Ellison. I've had him on my podcast. If you're interested in seeing that, it's on my YouTube page. You can check that out. He's great. You remember that. Yeah. He's, look, I support him completely, but unfortunately Florida is red. Like I was saying, it really is. It's red. And the question then becomes, and this is a big thing in Florida, because there's South Florida, and then there's the middle of the state, and then there's what we call Floribama. And there's very distinct demographics in those regions. And obviously Marco Rubio appeals heavily to the Latino voter. Okay. Yeah, that's a problem. So the Latino voter. And so, obviously Rubio gets a big push from the Cubans. But also important, we have had increasing blue amounts of Latino voters. because really that's also generational. You know, your older Cubans are those, they're just red. They're red because they hated Kennedy, the Bay of Pigs, blah, 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 Castro, they're red. Nothing you say, you cannot reason, right? But I have been meeting blue Cubans. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll take probably a few more election cycles to really get that more of them as they die off. I know that's a horrible, but kind of that's what we're waiting on, is older people to go. But yeah, I would love to see Alan Ellison win. And I think that we're still a red state. I'd love to see somebody primary Marco Rubio. That's what I'd like to see.
Because in Floribama, I would imagine he's not super popular because Rubio didn't like Trump, right?
Yeah, no, he's not. And, you know, in Floribama, you can imagine the people that are there. It's a very different demographic. But, you know, look, he still has them. The Republican Party falls in line, and they have a very big statewide machine where it's very different for a Democrat running. Even like running here as a Democrat, you have a very weak machine behind you. Yeah, so even if you were able to really be a person that the majority of people liked, you're not going to be able to have the same reach because your machine is woefully inept compared to what the infrastructure that the Republicans have in place in our state. And that's a big source of our issue here for statewide races, is we have a really poor party infrastructure in this state.
You think that'll ever change? Like, how do you enhance that party infrastructure so that Democrats?
We're working on it. We're working on it. We look to place. Look, Nevada just did what we're trying to do. I mean, that's the playbook, and that's what the movement that we're part of, Generational Change, and my volunteer organization. That's what we're trying to do: is build this coalition, get more of our people in state party positions. We actually have. I want to say we have 3 progressives that are have votes, and I forget what they're called. They're not committee people. They're whatever they are. The party thing. We got 3 progressives on this year on the board or whatever their thing is. So we're making progress now. Even getting our people in there is just part of the battle, because even with all the right people in there, it's still a pretty pathetic organization in terms of its infrastructure. It's bad. Like, it's been neglected for a long time. It's been very neglected. And that's because we're a red state and they don't invest a lot of money here. And a lot of the Democrats that are here actually are Republicans that just say they're Democrats. And so, like Debbie Wasserman Schultz or Charlie Crist actually was a Republican. So we don't have enough of a push yet. But that's the part we're working on right now.
One last question for you. I can't help but ask this topic, given the events of last night. There's a lot of anti-Asian kind of sentiment and violence in the country. And I was curious, like, what's the perspective from Florida? A lot of this seems to be happening in New York City and San Francisco, but you do wonder is there an undercurrent going on? And just was curious to get your thoughts.
I have not seen that here, which does not mean it's not happening. But again, this goes to what's our demographic. We don't have a very large Asian, or what I'm thinking of is probably what's we're talking about are East Asian people. It's just not one of, San Francisco, Seattle, I mean, you've got that's where, but we really don't. But yeah, we see all sorts of horrible things. We have enough problems here within our Black community that, from one area hating on the Black community in another area. And it's just, right now we're just seeing a lot of suffering and a lot of hate and a lot of desperation. And when you take people that are desperate and you combine that with our education system and our media, which is like creates ignorance, it's like a recipe for disaster. And what happened in Atlanta, I'm not sure what the background is and what the story is and why they're going to, of course, investigate it. I can tell you what it is. That's a crazy person filled with rage and hate. That's what it is. Like, it's not rocket science. Like, they're going to sit there and try to figure out his motive. Yeah, his motive is he's crazy and full of hate, and probably sparked by total desperation and desperate times. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that. And when you have people like a president who calls it the China virus and other sort of xenophobic, ignorant nonsense, yeah, we're going to start to see an escalation in this kind of stuff as more and more people are getting more and more desperate and more like mentally ill. And that's what's going to happen. And by the way, again, we don't have healthcare to help with things that people need help with. And I think, like, think about this. Do you have kids?
I do. 2 boys.
Okay. So what wouldn't you do if you needed to get your kids some sort of operation and you couldn't afford it? What wouldn't you do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I go pretty far.
That's what I'm saying. And when you start to see more and more people having homelessness and hunger and desperation, you're going to start to see crime go up. I think it's inevitable. And then you're also going to have people on the fringe in terms of their mental stability. You know, we're not all on the equal field to start. And so, you know, there's going to be some people that are going to get pushed over the edge. And like I said, I would do pretty much anything. So when I see things happening and people taking up arms, I'm thinking, yeah, if that was the person standing between my kid getting surgery because they won't sign on to Medicare for all, I don't know. I think we're going to start seeing more violence. And the more we, of course, assert it to the other, whether it's immigrants from south of the border or Asians or Muslims or whatever, it's all coming from this same panic and fear. And I'm not sure. We'll have to see what this guy said. Like, was it because of the stuff about Trump talking China virus? Like, what was his particular beef with the Asian community in particular? And really, it wouldn't have been any different to me if they were people of any other community. You know what I mean? Like, if he went on some like Lithuanian shooting spree and started killing, whatever, or Greeks, or I'd say the exact same thing. Like, yeah, it kind of matters why, but not really.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt he's a disturbed individual, and it'll be interesting to find out like what was the tipping point for him.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be a number of contributors, but yeah, it's a little scary because I tend to agree with you. The mindset of scarcity in a very stressful time brings out kind of this kind of sometimes very emotional reactions, and people want scapegoats and they want to point their finger at someone to blame. And, in this case,
kicking down is easier. Kicking down is easier. And yeah, I'm sure whatever this guy's thing he had, whatever the particular spark that had something to do with the Asian population. But again, there has been a significant increase in the hateful rhetoric towards Asians. And I do think a lot of that is from the Trump rhetoric based on the coronavirus. I think that has definitely caused this sort of recent spike. But yeah, I mean, not at all surprised. You can only have a leader spouting hateful, insightful rhetoric for so long until the one person who's not slightly balanced for whatever reason gets the idea, and it doesn't take much, you know?
Yeah, that is for sure. The combination of mental instability, economic scarcity, anxiety, and a narrative that demonizes or dehumanizes other groups.
Exactly.
And then access to firearms. It's a tough cocktail.
It's a perfect storm. And that's where we are. And I've been saying this for a long time. I unfortunately think things are going to have to get a lot more worse in terms of violence before they're going to get better. I think that it's scary, but I think power concedes nothing, and no revolution really has ever happened nonviolently. And that's just the reality when we're looking at chipping away at an oligarchy, is that ultimately you get enough people to realize that we need to stop kicking down and we need to punch up. And when you can get that coalition together, I'm not a proponent of violence, but I am a person who knows history fairly well. And it repeats itself quite often. And I don't see how this ends. Like you said, this perfect storm, I don't see how it ends any other way. That's just the unfortunate, like the, inconvenient truth.
Well, I hope you're wrong for all of our sakes, but I definitely can see why you would think things will get worse. but we'll.
But I do think they'll get better. But I do think that things will get better. I just think that Americans need to be punched a little bit harder before they're going to really understand that this is something they need to be fighting for. Because until it affects people, they don't really care.
Yeah. Well, Jen, I really appreciate you coming back on the show, and I'm so grateful that you're pushing hard with generational change and the Gen Core. How can people stay on top of what your latest kind of efforts are and sort of just stay in the know?
Well, first, everybody should subscribe to Generational Change on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and on iTunes. We have the audio versions. Be Patreons. And also, I want to plug on Saturday from 1:30 to 7, I'm hosting a live stream telethon called Free Assange Forum. And there will be different panelists. Every hour, we have different groups of people ranging from, I've got Medea Benjamin, John Kiriakou, Chris Hedges is coming on, Jordan Cheriton. I've got like this all-star cast, the Justin Jackson's coming on. So like this all-star cast of people. And really, it's going to be promote awareness. We need to be contacting the Department of Justice and demanding that they drop the charges against Julian Assange. This is a First Amendment issue, and it's really massive. So check out Generational Change. And you can follow me on Twitter at JenFL23 and Instagram JenFL23.
JenFL23. There you have it. Well, Jen, as you may have sensed, you are a little bit left of where I am, but I think we both want the same outcome, which is we want everyone to have a healthy, thriving life and be able to take care of their family and to live in peace. So hopefully we can get there together, and look forward to having you back on the show in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was great.
With that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.